Buying the wrong house in Vancouver could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, or worse, you could end up stuck with a property that no one else wants to buy. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share the certain types of houses that savvy buyers run from like the plague and why skipping this advice could be the worst decision of your life. Look, I've helped a lot of people over the years, and even in my own personal experience, I've looked at a lot of houses. So between that and working in real estate, I've seen a thing or two. And I hope that you find value in this video and that it ends up saving you a lot of money and a lot of headache down the road. And look, I want to hear what your thoughts are, whether you agree or disagree. So let me know what you think in the comments. So let's kick it off with those 100-year-old beauties, those heritage homes. I love an old home, charming, full of character. It's got that craftsmanship that's really hard to replicate today with those unique features, but I would not buy one. Here's why: the plumbing, lead pipes. Now, I'm confident that these houses have been renovated over the multiple owners over the 100 years, but like maybe some of those pipes didn't get replaced. And if you gotta replace pipes in the house, it's gonna cost you tens of thousands of dollars to redo that piping. Next up is electrical. They were done with knob and tube wiring. Now it's hopefully been replaced. God help you if it's not been replaced yet. But if it was replaced sometime in the 1950s, say 1960s, the insulation in there is nearing the end of its lifespan, which is 70 years. Modern insulation is gonna have a 100-year lifespan. And if it doesn't have that, you might have to replace all of the wiring. Again, tens of thousands of dollars. Now we have asbestos. That is the silent killer. It was used to insulate hot water pipes back in the day, right? You gotta keep the hot water pipes from touching the wood and potentially causing a fire. But it's also found in floor tiles or ceilings. And you gotta test for this stuff, and if it's found, it's gotta be professionally removed, and that's gonna be really expensive to do. It's mandatory. Next up, those charming features that are also, I'm sorry to tell you, safety hazards, especially if you have young children. Think of things like the laundry chutes, the dumbwaiters, staircases that are steep, and the narrow doorways, those non-working fireplaces. They're all cute, but they're cute until they become safety risks. And again, especially if you have young kids. You don't want your kids playing around in the dumbwaiter or the laundry chute, and that stuff is gonna get expensive to change. Properties in the flood zone. I mean, you're probably saying, well, duh, I wouldn't buy in a flood zone, but I'm talking about getting really deep on this stuff. Like, there's so many flood prone areas that you gotta be mindful of. You've got houses built on the floodplains of the Fraser River, those ones that are at or near sea level in Richmond and Delta, other low-lying areas near the Fraser River, the Nicomel and the Serpentine Rivers, and those are out in like Surrey and Langley. And you've even got some houses built in Vancouver and the Southlands that are gonna be prone to flooding. Think of the Sumas Prairie out in Abbotsford. That was severely impacted not long ago in November 2021 when we had that atmospheric river event. So you gotta be mindful of these things, and even if the home is never flooded, I still wouldn't do it. And here's why: the insurance costs. Okay, insurance is super expensive if you can get it. Like, think of a home that's expected to potentially flood one every 10 years. That can be like $10,000 for a policy annually. It could be more to cover potential claims. In some cases, again, you might not even be able to get it if you're in a really high-risk area like the Sumas Prairie. You also gotta be mindful of your resale value. Buyers are wary of homes in flood-prone areas, particularly nowadays. In the last 3 years or so, since 2021, I've just seen that so much higher on a buyer's priority list of just like, and we don't want anything in the floodplain, and then, you know, we gotta look at the map and check everything. So be mindful, floodplains. Even if there is a chance in 1 in 200 years, 1 in 500 years for a flood, I wouldn't rely on that data just because of all the crazy storms we've been having. There's no guarantee. I'd be running away. So check flood maps, check city planning resources to understand all of the risks before making an offer. Number 3 is underground oil storage tanks. Listen, if you've got one there, even if it's decommissioned, where the oil's been removed and replaced with sand, even if that's done, I would still want the seller to remove it. And here's why. It's because those cleanup costs, they're expensive. Removing a tank, testing the soil, that can cost well over tens of thousands of dollars. If the oil's leaked beyond the property line, costs can skyrocket into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm talking like $250,000 if things are really bad. True story, I actually had a client buy a property just in the last few months, and it was funny enough, it was a over 100-year-old house. They knowingly bought it. Their oil tank was there. We found it in the process of buying this home. But the seller said, yeah, we'll take it out. After all that was done and the soil was removed and put back, I asked the other agent, how much did it cost the seller? And she said around 80 grand to remove a decommissioned oil tank and some soil. And then on top of that 80 grand, the seller still had to return the yard to its original condition. So those costs, they add up. If a seller refuses to remove a decommissioned oil tank, I'd run. You never know. Pro tip, always get an oil tank scan before making an offer, or you can make it a subject of your offer if you want it. Number 4, houses flipped by number companies. I'm not saying that every renovate to sell is a disaster. There's a need for this in the market for people to update older homes and get compensated for that. But the problem is a lot of these ones I'm seeing are by inexperienced folks who are hiring inexperienced contractors and tradespeople, and they're just doing a poor job. So the big red flag for these ones is the cosmetic stuff. Look for uneven molding, poor paint jobs, uneven floors. All that's gonna suggest that the job was rushed renovations. You know, if you're seeing these cosmetic things, well, what's going on behind the walls? What's not fixed? Another way to watch for these ones and check for them is how quickly was this home, like when was it last bought and when did they put it on the market? These guys are trying to catch the market. So if it was bought 6 months ago at quite a lower price, significantly lower, and now you see it's updated and on the market at a much higher price, like that might suggest that they've possibly cut some corners. I actually have a horror story for you for this one. A client of mine bought what looked like a stunning home. It was a renovated to sell house in North Van. And we did all the due diligence, home inspection, contractors came in, and it just looked like there was some cosmetic issues here. And they moved in and things just went really bad. And now those conversations are really awkward with this client. But we did all the due diligence, right? We looked at the permits they'd pulled and pictures from during the renovation. But things like the guys who put the drywall in used the nail guns, and the nail guns went into the pipes. And so when these clients of mine moved in, turned on the water, started coming through the ceiling, the windows, what looked to be just hung a little skew, ended up being rotten all the way through. And even though the roof was new, that had to come off, and that house has been wrapped under plastic for like years now. So, and they're suing this seller, obviously, for the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they have been having to pay to get this home fixed up so they can live in it. And that's money that they just didn't have. So watch out for houses flipped by numbered companies. And this kind of applies to new construction too, especially if it's done by like a smaller builder. Building is expensive. Corners sometimes get cut. And if the guys don't have the experience and they're under financial pressure, you really gotta be careful. I wouldn't buy it. Number 5, over-the-top custom features. So these are things like a man cave that's just over the top with sports memorabilia and the rest of it. Maybe like a custom built-in fish tank. It might impress some people, but these things can be a costly headache for other people or for you. Like maybe there's a secret room there. These things get expensive to redesign when you get bored of them. Unless you got money set aside for that, I wouldn't buy it. And I think this also actually applies to over-the-top custom kitchens. Some people go over the top on renovations, right? They spend like $300,000 on a kitchen. Well, that's gonna be really nice for you, but maybe the next person's not gonna appreciate it as much. Those features, they don't always translate into resale value. Number 6, houses facing busy streets. Now, the noise pollution and the safety concerns aside, these houses are tough to sell in a down market. I had a couple townhomes actually earlier this year, and they were both on Mount Seymour Parkway, which is a very busy street in North Van, and they took so much longer to sell than they would have otherwise, and they fetched significantly lower prices than others in the same complex. Like the only reason I might buy a house on a busy street is if I could see that it was in the path of development and a land assembly was inevitable, which is when they're gonna like squish 2, 3, 4 houses and put townhomes or condos in their place, and you're basically just getting a lift on the land. But that's gonna have a big open end on timeline, and you're gonna have to live in that house until that redevelopment happens, which is all market dependent and you never know. So I would never buy a house on a busy street. Last one we're gonna get into is float homes. Now, it's not really a house, I guess it's a houseboat. And you know what, living on the water, it can really seem idyllic, but it comes with risk. These risks are majorly mortgage fees. Mortgage fees are unregulated and they can increase unexpectedly. So that's gonna increase your monthly costs potentially out of the blue. Maybe you're not ready for that. Also, what if your mortgage contract ends and they don't renew it? Well, now you gotta relocate this float home, and that's gonna be expensive, and you gotta find somewhere to put it. And maybe that's not gonna be where you wanna live. So I would never buy a float home. Maybe I'd rent one as an Airbnb, but I would not buy one. So have you encountered any of these issues, or do you have a nightmare story that you can share with me? I'd love to hear it. Put it in the comments. And if you're looking for an honest real estate agent, a direct communicator to help you buy or sell your home, especially in Metro Vancouver, love to help you with that. Josh Kepke with Real Broker. I've been in the top 10% of real estate agents here for the past several years, and it'd be a privilege to just connect with you. So if you're shopping outside Canada though, I can connect you with some great other agents all across Canada and even in the United States. And if you want more tips on buying and selling, just click that playlist right there. There's lots of great tips in there. And if you want to watch some tours of some local homes, click that one up there. And if you never want to miss another one of these videos, just subscribe.